My name is Lilian and my matrix number is 276990. Chopstick. What is the first thing that comes to the mind when you think of chopstick? Two sticks of same shape, size, and materials, right? But have you ever noticed that even though it is made out of two identical sticks, it doesn't have a standardized design? Some of them have blunt ends, some have rounded tips, some are even flats. Don't be confused, they are still all chopsticks. They just belong to different countries. According to statistics, there are currently more than 1.5 billion people around the world using chopstick every day. Well, this is not an exaggeration. As a child living in a Chinese family in Malaysia, I was trained by my parents to eat with chopstick at a very young age. With over 10 years of experience in eating with chopstick, I can say that we, especially the Chinese, cannot live without chopstick most of the time. However, despite the fact that almost as many people around the world use chopstick on a daily basis as use knife and forks, I realize that most people often ignore these unassuming tools, which, apart from knowing that this is a tool for eating, they are completely clueless about its other aspect. Good afternoon, I'm Pete to Madam Amida and all fellow audience. Today, I would like to share with you those facts about chopstick that you probably did not know. My speech today will cover three aspects of chopstick, which are the history, symbolism, and etiquette of chopstick. The first aspect is about the history of chopstick. The origin can be traced back to at least 1200 BC in China. The world's oldest chopstick, found at the Yanshi site near Anyang in Henan province, are made of bronze, and by their size, design, and materials, they were originally used as cooking tools rather than as an eating utensil as we know it. Chopsticks were first used as utensil for eating around 400 AD, when resources became scarce in China, and chefs tried to save fuel by chopping the food into smaller pieces so that the food could be boiled more quickly. These smaller pieces of wood were more easily to pick up with the chopstick design. As time passed, the material used to make chopstick gradually evolved, with each dynasty appeared in its own materials. Brass chopstick appears during the Western Zhou dynasty, lacquer chopstick during the Western Han dynasty, and the gold and silver chopstick during the Tang dynasty. Of these different types of chopstick, silver chopstick gained more popularity in ancient time as it was thought to detect poison in food at the time. In fact, silver chopstick did not react to some of the most popular poison at that time. Instead, it discolored on contact with garlics, onions, or rotten eggs, which are all reduced hydrogen sulfide. By 500 AD, chopstick has spread broadly across Asian countries. The honorable and upright man kept well away from both the slaughterhouse and the kitchens, and he allows no knife on his table, quoted from the famous ancient Confucius philosopher Confucius, indicating his anti-knife beliefs. The popularity of the chopstick has to be attributed to Confucius because, as a vegetarian, he saw sharp knife as a reminder of the slaughterhouse and a symbol of violence and fighting. Hence, Chinese chopsticks have a blunt but not pointed end. Traditionally, Korean chopsticks are made of metals and first appears in bucket periods. At that time, metal chopsticks were favored by the royal family, and guess why? Yes, as I mentioned earlier, to detect poison and act as a wealthy symbol. Later, metal chopsticks managed to maintain their popularity during the Korean War due to the limited resources, at which point people tried to recycle the tin cans to make flat chopsticks in order to save the material they used to make them. Well, in Japan, chopsticks were initially used only for religious purposes. This was because chopsticks were believed to be able to connect humans to the god. It was believed that during the rituals, the god will occupy the worship chopstick, and that way, people add the worship food with the worship chopstick. They will be able to share the food with the gods. Over time, chopsticks have evolved into a common tableware, which have a pointed ends design to suit the food commonly eaten by the Japanese, which is fish, in order to remove the fish bone easily. Well, this is the first aspect of the history of chopstick. Now let's proceed to the second aspect, which is about the symbolism of chopstick. The second aspect is about the symbolism of chopstick. Chopsticks symbolize Chinese family's value of always being united. Okay, now, do you think you can break a chopstick? It's easy, isn't it? What about if it's 5? Then it would be a bit difficult, right? What about if it was 10 or a bunch of chopsticks? Then it would be impossible to break them, right? Are these questions familiar? I'm sure some of you here will understand what I am talking about. Our elders have used this question as the opening line of chopstick stories since we were young, telling us that we are all like this chopstick, that if we are separated, we are as big as one chopstick and can be easily divided. But if we are united, we are as unbreakable as a bunch of chopsticks. The story of chopstick is more than just a story. Its underlying meaning has had a huge impact on the values of Chinese family. The story of chopstick has been passed down from generation to generation of Chinese people, reminding the future generation to be united. Apart from the story, the ancient custom of chopstick has also been used to represent the value of unity. For example, the Hakka people used chopstick to symbolize family's root, which they would tie up the chopstick for worship on an altar, part of which would be placed facing inward and other facing outwards, indicating that there is a mutual help within and outside the families. Chopstick also symbolize blessing for others. Chinese people love to give chopstick to their families and friends on festival or birthdays. This is because the Chinese pronunciation of chopstick is kuaizi, which is very similar to the Chinese pronunciations of happiness, which is kuai le. Thus, giving them chopstick as a gift means giving them happiness. As chopstick can only be used in pairs, Chinese people will give chopstick as a gift to their business partner as a sign of close cooperation between them. However, never give silver chopstick to a partner, as this represents temptation and mistrust. Indeed, chopsticks are often chosen as a popular gift for newlywed, as they come in pairs, which means blessing them never to be apart. It also symbolizes a wish for the newlywed to have a child soon, because the Chinese pronunciation for quick is kuai, and the Chinese pronunciation for child is zi. So, besides looking at the symbolism of chopstick, we will now look at the third aspect of chopstick, which is the etiquette of chopstick. The third aspect is about the etiquette of chopstick. Chopstick have a set of prescribed etiquette that need to be followed in order to avoid being considered rude. Well, when eating with your elders or hosts, it is necessary to wait for them to pick up their chopstick and take the first bite before you start eating to show your respect for them. Besides, do not bang your bowl with your chopstick, as this will be looked down upon by those at the table, as it is similar to how beggars often make noise with their chopstick and voice to attract passersby to give them alms. In addition, never cross your chopstick on the table when they are not in use. This is a rude attitude as it carries a connotation of rejection and implies a sign of unwelcome or displeasure. Apart from not crossing your chopstick when placing them, please do not place your chopstick pointing at others at the table, as this implies accusation as is considered rude. Some chopstick taboos can even remind the Chinese of death. You should never eat with chopstick of unequal length, as this implies death. This is because using chopstick of unequal length is like a coffin of unequal length on all sides. Besides, never stick your chopstick upright into the rice, as it is similar to the way the Chinese burn incense to worship the disease. Next, when someone offers you food, receive it on a plate rather than with chopstick. This is because it is similar to the ritual of passing cremated bones with chopstick at the Chinese funeral. Note also that you should be careful not to accidentally drop your chopstick on the ground, as Chinese believe that if you accidentally drop your chopstick on the ground, you will wake up your deceased loved one who are sleeping underground, which is a very disrespectful act. All these aspects I have mentioned are aspects of chopstick that people might not be aware of. As an overview of the points I mentioned earlier, chopstick, with their 1.5 billion users, are more than just a pair of stick-shaped tableware. The history, symbolism, and etiquette of chopstick are a testament to the ongoing improvement and perpetuation of Chinese life over thousands of years, carrying a strong microcosm of traditional Chinese culture. Although Chinese civilization has a long history, when you think about it, many of them survive to this day, but chopsticks are one of them. Thus, as I mentioned at the beginning, chopsticks have gradually become popular and widely used over the course of a long history, which make it difficult to realize how rich the cultural connotation of these blank-looking chopsticks really are, as well as how old the story behind them really are. Therefore, whether you know how to use chopstick or not, when you have the opportunity to use them in the future, please take some effort and time to get to know them and follow the etiquette that belongs to them, as they are the result of thousands of years of Chinese culture that deserve attention and respect. So that's all from me. Thank you.